Present day. Present time.
Hello guys, I hope you're all being doing well. So today I'll be making a video on my journey to Linux. But before we get fully into the video, I want to give you a little bit background about myself. So I was born in this beautiful city called Ponce, Puerto Rico. Yes, I know. It's that island in the Caribbean that no one notices because we're so small. So my dad had a master's degree in computer engineering, and I guess you could say tech was pretty much on my in my DNA. And so I had this little habit as a kid that I like taking anything out of technology, toaster, fridge, literally anything I get my hands on that was technology. I used to take it apart and put it back together, and it was just like that's how I was as a kid. And the crazy thing is, even as a kid, I not only took it apart but put it back together like some mini math scientist. So this wasn't a problem. My dad was okay with it, but this started becoming an issue till I started school. On my first day, let's just say, this is kind of embarrassing to admit. So I took apart my teacher's computer and put it back together. And let's just say the teacher wasn't too happy and she ended up calling my parents. So I remember the teacher talking to my mom, and the next day they talking to a doctor, pediatric. I don't know what the heck type of doctor it was, but I know I got taken to the office and I was asked to go outside, and the person talked to my mom. And then I remember my mom grabbed me after she got out, and she was really angry. And I don't think that she was angry at me. She was more angry of what the doctor told her. Cause think about it. No one wants to, like, I don't think that's just a Puerto Rican mom type of thing. It's like if someone told you there's something wrong with your kid, I think any parent will be upset. Anyway, she ended up leaving with me really mad, but she didn't say nothing to me even if I asked. Okay, so fast forward to the next day. The teacher had to sit me down and she had to explain to me that I freaking had autism. This teacher pretty much wanted me to look at myself like this.
I'm retarded?
Just kidding. Actually, I don't even know if she actually wanted me to look at myself like this. But I was really blunt as a kid, and I looked back at her and I told her that was retarded. Let me explain something about us Puerto Rican and my culture. We're this type of culture that if we have a disease or any condition, we refuse to accept it. We have like this we want to be strong mindset. Like we don't accept that. Like if someone tells us we're crazy, we don't accept it. We don't even acknowledge it. And that's pretty much what I did. Like I never really acknowledged that I have autism. I ignore it. I never let it stop me from doing anything. To be honest, I felt pretty normal. And come to think about it now, I think if I had the same mindset that I have now, I probably would have thought that that teacher was high or something, and she was smoking that good old Kush or something. Buffalo Sawyer, am I right, guys? But I didn't know about drugs back then, so I couldn't think that. So even though this didn't really annoy my parents, because my parents always encouraged me to learn and the way they raised me, everyone else around me that I went to was getting really annoyed with me doing what I did. But I had to come to the realization that I had to put my focus onto something else. So I did what any other normal kid would do. The sarcasm, by the way. So my dad has this really big, thick computer books, and I started reading and getting a dictionary to read them because I was, in some ways, I was really ahead of like reading and stuff. 'Cause my parents always encouraged me to learn even before I started school. So yeah, and I'm telling you, those books were thicker than a bowl of oatmeal. Like they were the fattest books. And after I learned all those things, I got obsessed with Windows and I started breaking Windows on purpose and fixing it because I just wanted to learn more. Eventually, I became like some sort of wizard or warlock or whatever you want to call it. But then my mom decided to drop a bomb on me and she told me that we're moving out of Puerto Rico to like more of the North America continent, more up. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta learn a whole new language. So I started watching cartoons and eventually I started kicking and understanding some of the words. And I taught myself English through cartoons and just reading stuff. Or even like in order to like pronounce things better, I used to write the word how you properly write it, but then write it in Spanish letters so I could pronounce it better. Basically, write it in the way I would write it in Spanish. Then I took all my desk computer books and I translated to English because I figured that if I went to school down there and where they speak English, I had to learn how to use the interface and everything in English. So I relearned everything I knew but in English. And I did a dual boot in my parents' computer and I installed an English version of Windows Vista. So by the time I hit middle school, my friends started to talk about Linux, and I was like, I've actually read some about Linux in my dad's book because apparently that was in his time when he was studying, that was a big thing. I knew things like a little bit about it, but I mostly knew the history of Linux and why Linux is what it is. To learn about other distros and how they work, I didn't know a lot. I just knew the basics, but most of it was just history. So eventually I ended up installing Ubuntu. And I got the computer parts because when I got to this part of United States, this teacher had a bunch of like computers that didn't work, and I told him if I could take some of those if he wasn't going to use them, he let them take them. So I took the parts that actually work and put them together into a computer that I could actually take home. So yeah, in middle school I ended up installing Ubuntu, my first distro ever. And oh boy, I had a horrible time. So a lot of architectures didn't work, packages weren't installing, I couldn't game. And to begin with, because it was an NVIDIA card, I had to, when I first installed it, if the installation boot the first time, but the second time it wasn't booting, and it was because it was running the proprietary drivers. I mean, it wasn't running in proprietary. It was running on open source for some reason. So I changed that and at boot, and then I ran into a problem that the Wi-Fi wasn't even really like working, so I had to hook it up to an Ethernet cable. And since then, I got used to using the Ethernet cable, but eventually, I figured out why I needed to install to get the Wi-Fi card to actually work. Because back then, for some reason, Linux had like huge compatibility issues. Ubuntu always given me a hard time to understand. I don't know why. It was maybe, I'm pretty sure it was the timeline, but even now when I try, I hate it. Anyway, eventually I ended up switching to something called Parrot, which I know wasn't meant to do everything that I wanted to do, but actually, I could actually like run things on it and it worked better, but I feel like it wasn't enough for me for what I wanted to do. And it was because obviously I did not know enough at the time. And I ended up trying other Debian distributions, and I didn't feel convinced enough. It felt like impossible, so I ended up crawling back to Windows. I wanted to use it so bad because I like what they stand for, and I was so into it, but I just couldn't see myself dishing Windows at the time. So, but this time at my life, as time went on, I've mastered Windows Vista, Windows XP, Windows 7, and Windows 10. 11, I didn't dig too much into Windows 11. I hated it. So later down the road, I got a job and I started working with this dude, and he was like a real country guy. He's the most country guy I've ever met. He had like a cowboy hat and he has like that, you know how the beard, how Abraham Lincoln's beard used to grow on the side? That's how he looked. He was big on gaming and I ended up being friends with him. And it's kind of weird because you never expect a country person to be tech savvy. And pretty much fast forward, I told him this one day how there was rumors that Windows was gonna start spying on you with Capital, whatever it's called. And he told me he doesn't use Windows. And I was like, wait, then what you use? Do you use Linux? And he was like, yup. 'Cause at this point, I was really concerned about my privacy and how Windows was taking screenshots of your desktop. Well, it wasn't doing it yet, but there was rumors I was going to, and usually when there's a rumor like that, it became truth, and later, yeah, it did become real. But he told me going back to the country dude, he told me he uses something called Garuda Linux. Specific kind was Garuda Linux Dragon Eyes, I believe. And I ended up installing it and using it for a bit. And I realized right away that it used Pac-Man. And I was like, wait, hold up. Isn't Pac-Man Arch? Because I remember reading it in some book. And then I ended up Googling it. And yes, it was Arch based. So I was like, what the heck am I doing? Why don't I just use the original version? Since I assume this one is more bloated than the original version, like the vanilla version. Even then, I was using Garuda, and I was like, I thought people say Arch was really hard, and I was using Garuda, and it wasn't that hard. So I was like, you know what? Let me just install it. So I ended up nuking all my hard drives. No Garuda, no Linux. I mean, no Garuda, no Ubuntu, no nothing, no Windows. I nuke all my hard drives and I only install Arch. And because the thing is, it interests me so much, and the fact that people said it was so difficult, I got so interested in it, and basically was like, I don't want to pussy out this time. I actually want to learn it, which is why is the reason I nuke on my hard drive, because I wanted to freaking force myself to do it and to actually learn. So when I boot up my live easel on my flash drive, and when I got to the installation screen, I had two options. Either I could run the install command, or I could do it
Tell you what,
manually.
I like you and I want you. Now we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. The choice is yours.
Let me explain something about myself. I'm a very curious person, and I just love learning, and I never had the chance to actually install and operate a system from scratch. So that's why I was so interested in it. And oh boy, that was the moment I fell in love with Linux, specifically Arch Linux. I fell so in love with it, the insides and outs. Like, games ran so much better. No annoying background processes hogging my freaking memory. Everything was like, it was so lightweight. See, this is how I like explaining Arch Linux. Arch Linux is like an empty canvas. It feels like something like classy. It's like an empty canvas, and you pay as you go. In other words, it's like you have an operating system, only what you need, and you install things as you go. And it didn't feel bloated because you're just building your own machine as you go. And it was such a beautiful thing and experience. Arch's love, Arch's life. The thing that I found the most is that in Ubuntu, when at the time I didn't know that much, and Ubuntu I always had like a problem getting a package, but the Arch repository, if the version didn't work, there was always another version, like AUR or another repository. It's just it has so many options. So if something didn't work, eventually you're gonna find a version of that package that's actually going to work. So I spent freaking months. I was learning the command line. I was learning what each initial meant, because if I remember the initials and the meanings, it made it easier for me to actually understand. And Arch had like that. The command line, it felt more self-explanatory, so I was able to pick it up faster. So about 3 months passed, and I felt like I got a hold of it pretty well. So at this point, so I wanted to know if my opinion on Windows actually changed, and I didn't feel like installing Windows. So I borrowed my fiance's laptop, and I used Windows, and everything was just annoying me about Windows. And that's when I realized I never wanted to touch Windows ever again in my life. And yes, I use Arch, by the way. And at this channel, we sacrifice Windows users on Sundays, and we sacrifice Mac users on Saturdays to the Great Penguin. I promise you, we're not a cult. And this right here was my journey to Linux. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment and leave a like and tell me what was your journey like to Linux. I would love to hear you in the comments. And until next time. And remember, guys, keep it stupid simple.